Hello Daily Drafters and welcome to the format follow-up video for Streets of New Capenna. It's been an interesting couple of months here with the format, but everything must come to an end, and it is now time to bid farewell to New Capenna in daily draft fashion. What that means exactly is that in this video I will provide you with color pair tier rankings followed by my top 10 takes on the format. If you have any desire to draft New Capenna again in the future, such as a flashback draft on Arena, or at home with your friends, this will be a great video to reference to give you a quick reminder of how the format shook out and what to be looking for during your revisits. With that out of the way, let's dive into my tier rankings for the 3 color decks in the format. Starting with the Tier 3 deck, we have the Riveteers. Riveteers decks were usually red-green based with a smaller black splash, and the whole red-green treasures thing just didn't materialize. This is also the color trio in which Blitz was most concentrated in, and the juxtaposition between the aggressive Blitz mechanic and the more value-oriented treasure mechanic just meant that the deck was never focused enough to have outstanding results. In Tier 2, we have Obscura and Cabaretti. These decks could definitely do some powerful things, but they just didn't have quite the synergy and raw power that the top 2 decks in the format did. Obscura's family mechanic, Connive, ended up being an outstanding limited mechanic and one that was quite powerful and flexible. Cabaretti gave us Alliance, and while the mechanic was pretty good, it was difficult to get much more than one Alliance trigger per turn, really capping the deck's upside. In Tier 1B, we have the Maestros. This obviously leaves one deck left to be 1A, and I'm sure you all know what's coming, but I really do think that the Maestros decks made up enough ground over the course of the format to be considered part of Tier 1. This is actually the deck that I drafted most often in the format with 7 drafts, and I ended up with a 60% win percentage with the deck, 3 percentage points higher than my win percentage for the entire format. Whether you build this deck with a blue-black or a red-black base, either was strong enough to grind out enough value to compete with the best deck in the format, which was Brokers. You heard it once, you'll hear it again. Brokers decks in this format were oppressive. For those of you that remember the deck imbalance in Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, Brokers was equivalent to the power of Rakdos decks in AFR. If you ran up against a finely tuned Brokers deck in SNC, you may as well kiss one of your losses goodbye. Both blue-white and white-green based versions of the deck excelled in their own way, and it became obvious very early on by the entire community how good Brokers was and how imbalanced the families in Streets of New Capenna were. Now, we'll go ahead and dive into my top 10 takes on the format as a whole. Number 10. There are not a lot of accessible build-arounds. One of the things that makes formats so fun to draft is having access to a number of cards to build your deck around. Cards that change your pick order and make you want to do something sweet. It's not that Streets didn't have any of those cards, it's just that they all existed at higher rarities. If you were able to get your hands on a Bootlegger's Stash or an Arcane Bombardment, you could build a super cool deck, but those cards were both mythics, as were many of the other fun build-arounds, which just made for an overall less enjoyable experience. Number 9. You should be blitzing your creatures more often than not. This isn't something that would come naturally to most players, and in fact, if you go back and watch the first few SNC drafts on this channel, you'll notice that I wasn't blitzing very much, but it soon became very apparent that the value you get from blitzing these creatures was absolutely worth the cost in the majority of the cases. Girder Goons, for example, becomes 4 mana, deal 4 to your opponent, make a tapped 2/2, and draw a card. And it turns out that's just better than a 5 mana 4/4. Number 8. Shield counters are much better than they look, and are worth almost a full card. It was really difficult to judge exactly how valuable shield counters would be prior to playing the format. They obviously looked powerful, but exactly how powerful? Well, it turns out to be worth almost an entire card. It wasn't uncommon to have a shield counter on your creature trade for an entire creature from your opponent, and some of the better cards with shield counters seemed nearly unbeatable. Number 7. The official daily draft color rankings. Bringing up the rear in 5th place is red. After a medium-sized gap, we then have green in 4th. In 3rd place, we have blue. In a solid 2nd sits black. And at the top, the undisputed number 1, we have white. Number 6. There are a lot of wraths in the format. There was Depopulate and Corpse Explosion as playable but not outstanding wraths. Structural Assault was essentially unplayable, but was technically a 3rd. Nightclubber was a mini wrath that could do some serious work, and Hostile Takeover took the cake as the undisputed best wrath in the format. All of this to say that there was a real chance your opponent had any one of these at any time, and it's important to consider playing around all of these options. Number 5. The official Daily Draft top commons in each color. In white, we have the easiest, inspiring Overseer anyone's ever considered. In black, we have Girder Goons overtaking what everyone thought might be Murder. In blue, we have another surprise in Make Disappear. In green, almost as easy of a decision as Overseer, we have Jewel Thief. And in red, the hyper-efficient Strangle took the top spot. Number 4. Inspiring Overseer is oppressively good. You might be thinking to yourself, how good can a common actually be? Well, according to 17lands.com, Inspiring Overseer ended up with the 10th best game in hand win rate in the entire set, rares and mythics included. Overseer outperformed cards like Zeatora the Incinerator, Workshop Warchief, Fleetfoot Dancer, and even Obnixilis the Adversary. So yeah, take that for what it's worth. Number 3. 2-drops are more important than they've ever been. In a format that is billed as a slower, grindier 3-color format, getting on the board early was of the utmost importance. If your opponent curved out with a 2-drop followed by a 3-drop and a 4-drop, you were just sitting there playing tap land after tap land, and you had absolutely no chance in that game. Making sure that you affected the board early and often was the key to victory in SNC. Number 2. Brokers are busted and incredibly overdrafted as a result. Everyone figured out very early on how incredibly powerful the Brokers decks were, so much so that just a week or two into the format it became almost impossible to draft Brokers because of how contested the colors ended up being. If you plan on coming back to this format at any point in the future, just know that Brokers are absolutely the best deck in the format, but you will have to fight the table to be able to play it. And number 1, this is not a 3-color format. SNC was advertised as a 3-color format with 5 different crime families representing a 3-color pair to draft around. While those decks did exist, they were not what the format was about. Rather, the format was about finding which allied 2-color pair was open for your seat and drafting a much more streamlined 2-color deck with maybe a light splash to go underneath your opponent. While your opponent is playing tap land after tap land trying to set up their sketchy mana base, all you have to do is curve out like a normal limited deck to immediately have the upper hand. Thanks so much for tuning into the channel for the life of Streets of New Capenna, and if you didn't get to see many drafts or you just happen to discover this format follow-up video, go ahead and subscribe to the channel to get in nice and early on the next format. We've been surprised with a new format that hits Arena today, and you'll absolutely want to be subscribed to get in on Baldur's Gate content as early as possible. Thanks again for being here, and I will see you tomorrow for more daily draft content.